Hello, Internet. Once again, this is Kopitiam Council, and as always, I'm Haffisz.
And this is Adi. Welcome back to the show. I hope this past month with wishing you Selamat Berbuka Puasa, Ramadan Kareem, here from Kopitiam Council.
Yes, and today, as usual, we're gonna start off with our first topic, which is just go to our neighboring country, which is Singapore. What do Singapore have recently, Adi?
Okay, last time we covered the budget, so it was a bit more of a serious topic, but this time we're going to be a bit more lighthearted, depending on who you actually like in terms of the music world, because just recently, Singapore concluded the Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert in live
Woohoo!
in Singapore. So
Did you
if
go,
you're,
Adi?
of course not, I don't think. I think if me as a casual person going there and just says, "Hey, I'm not really a big fan. I just came here. I think I'm a diehard fan of an opportunity here." But it was. I heard it was a fantastic show. If you're a Taylor Swift fan
Of course.
and you're listening to the podcast, do let us know if you went to the concert. What is it like? How was the energy? Because I was told that this concert was supposed to encompass every single era of Taylor Swift up to now.
Mhm.
So a huge thing for the fans. But what's interesting here is that we have to point out is that this was the only show that was happening in Southeast Asia. How did Singapore get Taylor Swift to perform only in Singapore while other Southeast Asian countries such as Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, all these countries that also pay tribute and pay host to big Western acts. So, Hafiz, how did this happen? Why is it only Singapore?
The Minister for Culture and Entertainment, Edwin Tong, actually single-handedly went to Los Angeles to secure the deal of exclusive right, like you mentioned, of 6 nights of concerts a day. Not one, not two, not three, but 6 nights in a row for the Eras tour. That is a mind-blowing. If you're looking at the monetization of what this concert would have been. So just to give a perspective, there were before Singapore, they held the same similar. I'm not so sure if it's the similar nights, number of nights, but they did in Australia, which is they got around 300 million US dollar for that, and in Japan, 200 million. The figure for Singapore is not out yet, but we can expect it around that ballpark figure as well. So this is no small feat. And just interestingly, I just want to highlight there was rumors because Edwin Tong cannot reveal the amount that they secure for the exclusive right, but he said the internet claim 1 to 2 million per night incentive. It's actually far from what they have paid. Whether it's true or not, because it's remained a secret between the Taylor Swift administration and the Singapore government. So he can just say that. But even 1 or 2 million a night is a huge. It's pure profit for the Taylor Swift company. And what I would like to highlight again, that the spillover, we know Singapore has been very aggressive with the entertainment since they hosted Formula One in this region. Only Singapore also dominate, monopolize Formula One. Malaysia departed the party in 2000, if I remember correctly. But since then, Singapore going so strong. It's a night race on top of that. So everything joining the after party. My God, people actually attended for the after party, not the actual rest itself. So it speaks volume, like how Singapore really take it seriously. They're not just, hey, we have the money to organize it, but it comes in with their professionalism, infrastructure, and so on. What do you think? Why Singapore was able to be so dominant in this?
Well, since you mentioned Minister Edwin Tong, maybe he himself is a big Swiftie, so the negotiations must have been very passionate. That's besides the point. But I think the case here we have to look is that Singapore itself has always played somewhat of the hub for Western investment, for Western capital to actually come into the region here. Singapore as a destination for investment compared to, let's say, Malaysia, Philippines, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Indonesia presents itself to be a much more attractive position, attractive destination as well, since the infrastructure is already set up there. But we have to look at how they were able to also secure the exclusive rights because, from what I've seen, they were able to use the emergency fund that was supposed to be used for COVID relief throughout 2020 to 2020, and they found out they just had a surplus. So, okay, how do we use this money to, how do you say, stimulate or bring some kind of attention over to Singapore. So obviously, who was the biggest star at the time, who was already planning a tour? You put two and two together. This is a great recipe for economic activity across the entire region. Because when you look at the people that do turn up, these aren't just Singaporeans, these aren't just Malaysians, these are people that are coming in from all across the Southeast Asia. If you see the Australia concert, there were people that were coming also from Southeast Asia just to catch in Australia if they weren't able to catch it in Singapore. So it's crazy because they know that people would come to watch Taylor Swift. They would come to watch the Western act like this, a very big superstar icon. But at the same time, Singapore has pivoted somewhat, like you said, to the entertainment industry, trying to use government assets, taxpayers' money in Singapore to boost up its own creative industry and creative economy. So I'm going to use one example here, which is the recently released game, which is Skull and Bones, created by Ubisoft Studios. Part of it was actually developed by their Singapore studio, which is all Singaporean talent, Singaporean developers. Now, whether or not you can say you like the game, for me, the game is personally is horrible. It's creatively bankrupt. It's morally bankrupt as well. But it doesn't matter. It shows that the Singapore government is actually funding game studios in their own country to actually uplift the skills for their creative talent. But I've heard some insider news from developers there. They're saying that they don't really prioritize creativity or innovation compared to a lot of Japanese or Western studios. What they focus on is just the technical side of things. And technically speaking, on the technical fidelity kind of side, yeah, it does live up to the whole idea of AAA games or modern games right now. So that's another example to put into what Singapore really is trying to do here. They're trying to tap into more because they've done the investment, the infrastructure for investments such as setting up banks and other financial hubs or financial infrastructure. So now I think they're going to move towards expanding their infrastructure in other domains so that it can maintain its the competitivity within the region as well, because Indonesia is rising up to become a very strong challenger to Singapore. Malaysia, in some regards, is also trying to take some part of the market share in different types of industries. So Singapore needs to remain competitive, and this is just another. This whole Taylor Swift concert tour is just another way that they can, in a way, display their competitiveness within the region.
But since we talk about Taylor Swift here, not like how they use public money to fund this initiative, I was very touched or very attracted to what Edwin Tong said, because he was asked, like, apart from money or monetary sum that they get, how is it going to benefit more tangibly? And he said, like, socially, like all this gain from money that will be directed to their social cause, like for their social schools and whatnot, it will be directed to that, and it will fund all these NGOs or very non-profitable social or arts or cultural works that Singapore have to show, especially from the local talent. So I think we need this kind of mentality where our ministers look beyond just like zero sum game between, like, hey, if we do this, it will give us this. In fact, we need to look things like how Singapore look. Okay, it's gonna be some kind of investment to it. There will be quite some of money, but do we just really look at in terms of return of investment when it comes to dollar and cents? Do we just look at, okay, we put 1 million, it gives out 5 million. For them, if it's even give it a loss or equal 1 million, but they gain from other things, intangible things, like Edwin Tong said, this is better than they could have a hope for. So that kind of answer when he gave in the parliament, answering to the opposition, I was like, wow, there's something deeply embedded in Singapore way of thinking, making policies for their country, because they realize that when 20 years ago the prime minister said they have to diversify from shipping and be a hub of just what they Singapore.
So they're looking beyond, basically. They're just
So
not
they're
the
looking
face
beyond.
value.
Yes, and they try to diversify the economy 20 years ago, and now they look at this. Look at Singapore right now. We no longer associate them only because of the shipping prowess back in whatever 100 years that they dominated the area. But now it's more than that already. We're talking about IT, like you said. Singapore is the gateway for the Western world to invest. Don't you agree?
Definitely. I mean, historically, it's always been the case for Singapore, and it's tried to always navigate in a foreign policy way that they're able to attract investors from all across the globe, because it knows that it doesn't have really the resources or the global standing to actually stand on its own. So it needs to project in a way more than what it really is, and it has succeeded. And I think it's going to continue as a strong policy moving forward. But like you said, the underlying elements that are at play that will bring about a lot of benefits for Singapore, not just with Taylor Swift, but who knows, future concerts, they're able to buy exclusive rights to other performances. Because I'm going to go back to Malaysia here. Malaysia does not have a very healthy environment to actually facilitate or to have these concerts. I mean, if you look at Good Vibes, when they had to cancel and put the kill switch, or just because a band member said something obscene to the federal government, to the Malaysian government. Of course, it's up to you whether or not you feel that it was within his rights to say so. For me, I disagree. There's a better way to, smarter way to actually throw your criticisms out. But you see, Malaysia, from there was all these conversations going about, like, Malaysia has kill switches. The Malaysian authorities has a kill switch to end the concert whenever they deem something may be suspicious or something that's of concern. And who actually makes that call here? There's no exact protocols unveiled to the public on how this kill switch actually operates here. So just, I'm speaking just from Malaysia alone. From there, that sends a lot of red flags to other musical acts across the world coming here. Says, okay, especially Western ones who are more of a, come from a more liberal disposition, they think, okay, we have to be careful here in Malaysia, because at any time they're going to kill switch, and they're probably going to bringing us in for questioning. The police is going to get interfere, and we're going to be banned from the country. So that's something a lot of PR people, a lot of tour managers don't really want to handle with. And I guess that puts Singapore ahead of Malaysia, because if why would I want to perform in a country where I have to be very, very careful here? Sometimes when artists, they perform on stage, they have, sometimes there's an element of being candid. Sometimes there's an element of, passions are very high, the crowd is, energy is there, and sometimes you lose yourself in the moment. So I have to understand, like, why artists sometimes act a bit more eccentric when they're performing live. So Malaysia, I think we, not just in terms of the negotiations to bring in these performances, but it's also the optics that we send out to the world. I'm sure the people who are organizing the concerts for Western or international performances coming here are very talented people, but they have to navigate through a lot of the red tape or a lot of rules here. So that's just putting it one situation, is that a huge social element here that kind of puts a barrier when it comes to performing in Malaysia. But we've seen at the backlash, if you don't want to go to Kuala Lumpur, come to Sarawak, come to Sabah, and maybe once we have the infrastructure, we could actually do that.
Maybe not Sabah, because I don't want to in the middle of the concert and then suddenly a total blackout. Sabah is notorious for blackout, so yeah, maybe not Sabah.
Well, if factories can bring in the generators, then we're going to have to ask the tour managers to bring generators for the stadium as well.
Exactly. Yeah, well, like I mentioned also, like how Singapore wanted to distribute the profits from to social causes. And recently, Adi, Malaysia was offered to host a Commonwealth game. There's nothing common about Commonwealth in terms of wealth. So as a compensation, Malaysia also offered 100 million quid to host the game. And after discussion with cabinet members, they said no to this. And Hannah Yeoh, in her press conference, explicitly say that this is come to dollar and cents only. Consideration is pretty much not so much an issue, except the timing. But even the timing, because we still have 2 years, and if we have a lot of money at our disposal, it could be settled whatever that needs to be done. But from this way of thinking also, Adi, I actually glad that we did not say yes to this, because I don't think people watch Commonwealth anyway. So the return on investment on that is going to be very, very low. But what I'm interested in, the principle on how we look at things, we should be thinking like, hey, if we say yes to this, how our local talents going to benefit from this? I think that should be our first priority, because Commonwealth can be a new platform for them to gain experience or for us to develop new sports. Maybe we want to venture into pickleball, for example. There's recently a very huge center open in Petaling Jaya for it. Maybe we want to um, uh, create a new talent on that certain spots. So that kind of consideration that I'm looking for what the minister should have said. But to my veil, it's just the minister talking about dollar and cents only. That's it. They said it's gonna be viable for us. 100 million quid. It's not gonna be enough. And then the cabinet says no. What do you think of this? I know. Would you agree Malaysia hosts a Commonwealth Games?
I mean, the fact that it was supposed to be held in Victoria, Australia, which was rejected, and Malaysia is kind of the emergency backup in case that Australia did pull out of the negotiations. I think Australia estimated at least $7 billion to actually attempt to even host the whole Commonwealth Games. And I think Malaysia kind of navigated through it in a way that was quite responsible, financially responsible. However, I think we need to put into perspective as well. This is not the only chance that Malaysia had to host the Commonwealth Games. The last time I think we held it was in 1998 during the Asian financial crisis. So if you're going to use an excuse of, let's say, it's economic reasons, then well, we've done it in through a much worse crisis back then. But of course, there's other factors that may contribute to this, like optics-wise. It does seem a bit tone deaf to host such a grand scale event during a whole when people are speculating that the economy isn't at the best financial health right now. But in a way, like you mentioned, you already put the excuse that the minister Hanayo made, that it comes down to dollars and cents. But I'm going to try to use the argument again with how you brought up with Taylor Swift, the underlying elements that would bring some kind of benefit to Malaysia. I mean, if you're going to run it at a deficit, let's say it does go over cost and you're going to hit the deficit in your budget, then you're going to have to produce a very spectacular event. It has to be one that is talked for many, many years and lives up to a huge standard. And I think when it comes to organizing an event like this, we have to look at what is it that actually makes it run, the budget run really high. Is it putting up a venue or place to stay for all these athletes, for all these individuals who will be participating? Or will it be like China and Brazil when China held the Olympics, when it had to terraform many parts of China to actually accommodate the Winter Olympics, or when Brazil held Carnival for the entire duration of these kinds of events? Of course, it did not reap any kind of benefit for them financially, but in terms of Brazil, it did create a huge perception that Brazil is the place to be to enjoy yourself, for all these athletes to actually do enjoy themselves. And I think if Malaysia is able to leverage on the so-called hospitality that we are very proud of, then maybe that could have created a very nice strength that could have played into a strength that we could use to multiply, to make it actually, in a way, transcend just the financial barrier, but to leave an impressionable mark that, hey, Malaysia can actually stand toe to toe with other hosts as well, because it has certain elements, social elements, or even hospitality to actually bring it to global conversation. But that is more just speculation on my part. I'm just playing out the idea, like, okay, what if, right? But the milk is already spoiled. The milk is already spilled, and I think you're right when it comes to looking towards alternative ways to attract for athletes. Because when it comes to, how do you say, outlets of creative or athletic endeavors, right? Malaysia, like you said, comes down to dollars and cents, whether or not it's financially viable, whether or not we can maintain a excess or even a surplus within the budget. But like you said, the difference between Singapore and Malaysia is that Singapore likes to look beyond. It likes to look at underlying elements that would definitely build up and make that much of a difference. So I think on balance, it was the right decision, but it's also a decision that could have played the other way. It could have been fantastic, because these games itself, right, not just because of the performance it gives for people to watch, but it's increases your global standing amongst the world. That if you're able to host these kinds of things, then very good, because in a way, it's now that Australia is rejected, Malaysia is rejected, I don't really want to see the Commonwealth end up a bit like Eurovision, where every country tries their hardest not to actually become the host, unless you're like, I don't know, Scandinavian countries who seem to like these kinds of things.
Or
Uh,
Israel.
or Israel, for some reason, it's in Eurovision, not even in Europe. Horrible.
Yeah, I mean, this is even Fahmi Fazil the other day mentioned that in terms of hosting events, concert is the number one margin profitable event. Sports events in second tier or third tier, because you need a lot of money to host, let's say, Formula One or Asian Games, Commonwealth, or even Olympics. So, in terms of profit margin, concerts are the better one. But hey, every time we want to host, even every time there's an attempt to bring Western artists, we know there's a certain group of people would say like, hey, haram, this is not should be done in the tanah Melayu. We should be keep it elsewhere. So I think on that spirit, we should reflect upon ourselves and think, what is our clear policy on this? Do we want to compete with Singapore, or do we just let it go to Singapore to monopolize everything and anything that comes in our way? All right. So
Mhm.
that's for Taylor Swift and Commonwealth Game. Next up, what are we going to talk next episode, Eddie?
Okay, I think we've already went through Singapore, we went through Malaysia, but let's try bring back to Sabah. So looking back, we're going to look into the arrangements between Sabah and Malaysia, and there's a reason why we're doing this. So stay tuned for that.
All right. Stay tuned. Coming up.